British workers, savers and pensioners all face tax hikes after a budget aimed at filling in the country's financial black hole. Chancellor Rachel Reeves had pledged a year ago that she would not raise taxes again, but the poor state of the country's finances forced her hand. So, will it work? And can the UK now finally get growing again? Hello and welcome to Roundtable. I'm Enda Brady. Now, the British Chancellor Rachel Reeves is pinning her hopes of economic recovery on a tax-busting budget that spared no one. It will raise billions more for her government, but critics say spending, tax and benefits are now out of control. So, has Reeves done enough to save herself and Prime Minister Keir Starmer, or have the British public had enough?
Budget Day in Westminster, the centrepiece of the British political calendar. The media was outside Parliament in full force ahead of the Chancellor's heavily leaked statement that she's coming for more taxes.
We need a fair and a sustainable tax system, one that generates revenues to fund the public services that we all use and supports investment to grow our economy. That does mean that today I am asking everyone to make a contribution.
Shall we cancel the turkey, Chancellor?
But the British budget is as much of a political event as an economic one.
This is a very traditional Labour budget. It raises a lot more in taxation, including on ordinary working class people, which will not be popular, but it also gives away about half of that to particularly the poorest groups in society. So I think for Labour MPs, they'll say, you know what, this is a Labour Chancellor and a Labour budget, and they will feel a little bit settled.
Predictably, opposition MPs are less impressed.
Look, it's the nightmare before Christmas. Taxes in the UK are going up to the highest ever levels. Pensioners are going to be paying more, workers are paying more, savers are paying more, investors and businesses are paying more. That's not what people need.
Whatever the Chancellor has announced today, even with the tweaks that she's announced, even with the little changes, people's lives are not getting better.
The government here says that it's focused on reducing Britain's national debt, but this budget still includes billions of pounds worth of borrowing. Now, in the UK, more than half the population takes more out of the state in benefits than it pays into it in tax, and the tax burden itself is the highest it's been since the 1940s.
So gone is talk of fixing the foundations in favour of a focus on the cost of living.
I don't see any measures in this budget which are actually going to cut debt. They may, at the margin, reduce its pace of growth, and the same indeed can be said about prices. I can't find a single measure that will reduce the cost of living.
If this budget was aimed at pleasing Labour's own MPs, after months of discontent, it seems to have done the trick.
This is a really positive budget today from Rachel Reeves, and the fact that she's the first woman Chancellor shines through. For example, the two-child benefit cap, so hated and introduced by the Tories, is being lifted. 450,000 children will be coming out of child poverty.
After a year of talking about tough decisions and putting country before party, in the end, this was a budget with politics in mind. The can has been kicked down the road, but there's increasingly little road left.
Well, let's meet our guests to discuss this one. Joining me here in the studio, we have the business broadcaster Ian King. We also have Charlotte Griffiths. She is editor-at-large for The Mail on Sunday, as well as the political commentator Zoe Grunewald. And Zoe, I'll come to you first of all. It's been said that this budget was all about saving Keir Starmer. Less so what Rachel Reeves wanted to do, just keeping Starmer in Downing Street. What do you reckon?
Well, I think Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves are kind of in lockstep, actually. I think they are both united by the purpose of this Labour government, which I think at the minute looks less ideological and more like survival. So my reading of yesterday's budget absolutely was about saving the government. It was appealing to Labour backbenchers who have been particularly fractious, giving them enough that they'll go back to their constituencies over Christmas and say, oh, we have 18 million for playgrounds, we've lifted the two-child benefit cap, and enough to keep the bond markets happy. Nothing too radical, no huge sweeping changes to the tax system, just enough to fill that black hole. For me, and for a lot of people sort of more towards on the left of the political spectrum, it was a bit of a a lost opportunity. I think there could have been more there. And I think really all they're doing is buying themselves time to the next pinch point where Labour MPs are going to come back and say, we want more, we need more, because we're not delivering for people who voted for us.
Thanks, Zoe. Charlotte, to you, for people looking in from outside of the UK, just paint a picture of how unpopular this government is and how unpopular it's going to get.
Oh, I can paint a very grim picture. Honestly, I'm a classic person who's been punished by this budget. I'm middle-aged, hate to say it, middle-aged, middle earner. I've got 3 kids, probably shouldn't have had the 3rd one because it's too expensive. And, you know, I'm caught up in the fiscal drag. I'm worried about my pension now. I am just the classic. I think I'm the backbone of this country, and a lot of my friends are. You know, I'm working hard, got my kids, and we feel punished. Honestly, a lot amongst my friendship group, we just feel very, very punished today.
What are people saying then? Are they going to make changes in terms of the hours they're working? Because it strikes me as a budget that is punishing working people.
Definitely, it's punishing working people. Actually, genuinely, I know people say this a lot about moving to Dubai. I know a lot of people moving to Dubai, and it's not just because of the tax. You know, I've got one friend, for example, he started a little business in marketing. He pitched himself to a bigger business, and the bigger business said, look, we like you the best, but we're going with the safe bet because it's just things are a bit tense at the moment. We don't want to take a risk. So he's just saying, right, well, I'm going to take my business to Dubai because nobody wants opportunity at the moment. There's just, people are too risk averse at the moment in the business sector, I think.
Ian, you're in the City of London, the financial area, every day, talking to the movers and shakers. What are they saying?
Well, I mean, Zoe mentioned the various parties that Keir Starmer, Rachel Reeves had to please, really. And the bond market gave them a big tick. You saw the biggest fall in 10-year gilt yields, which is a good proxy for government borrowing costs. You saw the biggest fall in 10-year gilt yields on the back of a budget than we've seen since 2006. So the markets were reasonably satisfied. She's doubled the amount of fiscal headroom that she required to meet her fiscal rules, although it's worth saying that at £22 billion by the end of this Parliament, that's still well below the long-term average, which is £28 billion. It gets you back roughly to where Rishi Sunak's, one of Rishi Sunak's budgets was when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer in 2022. So she's bought herself some time there. The city, basically, the markets really only care about whether the UK can carry on servicing its debts, and she did enough to convince them that the UK can carry on servicing its debts.
Thanks, Ian. Zoe, to you, Ian mentioned servicing government debt. There was one statistic I read, which Rachel Reeves put out there. Every £10 the government gets in taxes, £1 goes towards servicing the interest on debt. So it's not paying down government debt. 10% of everything they're getting in is just servicing the debt to keep their heads above water.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And it was one of the things that Rachel Reeves pointed to in her budget, and she continues to, and the Labour government continue to throw back to the Conservatives from their 14 years in office and say, part of this is down to you and your refusal to fix the roof while the sun was shining and properly service our debt and look at the productivity and infrastructure of this country. The 3 purposes of Rachel Reeves' budget, she said, was to bring down the cost of living, protect the NHS and bring down the cost of government debt. And I think there were definitely, it was definitely a budget that was focused more on balancing the books, fiscal responsibility and managerialism than anything that would kind of radically alter people's experience of living in this country. And actually, you spoke about balancing the books on the back of working people. That is true. If you look at where the bulk of these tax rises have come from, they are through freezes to the threshold. So considering this is a Labour government that is supposed to be protecting the interests of working people, actually, it feels like it is working people, especially young working people who are looking at their pensions, who are looking at being dragged into the next threshold, who are going to feel the effect of this the most. And when you look at the positive things, £150 off your energy bills, a bit of money for playgrounds, a few bits of spending here and there, I don't think there's enough in there to convince all these voters who voted for Labour at the last general election that this government is genuinely going to make them feel better off in 5 years' time.
Well, Zoe, just on that point, talking of voters and people who voted for Labour in the last election, we've been on the streets of London talking to people, and just take a listen to how they're feeling post-budget.
In general, I'm not happy with Labour at all, so I just think that they're ruining the country.
I have never regretted a vote more than voting for Labour this year. I feel like I've been lied to. I should have voted Green. I went with the party that I thought would do better in my particular constituency.
She's just been having to sort out one hell of a mess. And the whole government is trying really hard to do that, and they're not getting credit for what they're actually doing. They haven't got everything right, I admit that, but my gosh, they are having a go at trying to sort things out.
She's just wrecking the country, basically, making all the poor people pay for the rich people, and we're all losing money.
They don't understand the value of assets and the fact that, yes, we might have a lot of money in assets, but we certainly don't have money to afford the taxes which they're introducing and the price increases which are going on. We can't afford to pay extra bills, extra tax and earn less.
So, Charlotte, that's very interesting there. What do you think people are saying outside of London? That was in London, but, you know, the wider country. Do you think that will be repeated on every high street?
I do, actually. And actually, I've recently moved to the countryside from London because I feel like London is too difficult at the moment. You're not getting any return on your kind of work and striving. So I have actually, for the first time in my life, been hearing people in the country, and they absolutely echo what was said in those vox pops. And of course, there were farmers in that segment just there. And I did feel that the farmers weren't even considered by Rachel Reeves. And there's a real feeling in the countryside that they are Islingtonites, they are Londoners. They haven't ever left London, left the West London liberal elite, as they say, and really felt what it's like to be living in the countryside and striving and working and not getting much return back. And then on top of that, you know, the countryside finds it more difficult to cope with the immigration into their communities because they're not used to cultural diversity. So they have that shock factor as well.
Ian, growth, where is it going to come from? Every Chancellor of the Exchequer in UK history, for as long as I've been covering it and you, they keep using this word growth and it rarely materialises.
What it comes down to, Enda, is productivity. The OBR downgraded our productivity performance. And at the end of the day, productivity is everything. Productivity is what pays for wage improvements. It's what brings in growth ultimately, doing less with more. That's the very definition of productivity. And the UK's productivity has really been on a downward incline, not since the pandemic, although that didn't help, not since Brexit, the global financial crisis. The UK's productivity has not improved since the financial crisis. That's why the deficit to GDP ratio and the debt to GDP ratio has increased in the way that it did. Osborne got the deficit under control during the coalition years. Then you had the pandemic and that blew everything completely off course again. It's why the debt is as high as it is now.
How shocking, Ian, was it, the leak? So this Office for Budget Responsibility, they managed to publish the budget on a website link half an hour before the Chancellor delivered it. I mean, it's unprecedented.
Well, it was great for us journalists because it meant that we got a sneak preview of the budget. So it meant we were able to start talking about it. We didn't even need to hear Rachel Reeves' speech because we could all see for ourselves what was in it. To me, that was it kind of epitomised where this budget has been. So 83 days elapsed between Rachel Reeves announcing the date of the budget and the budget itself. And in every single one of those days, practically, there's been an idea floated in the media about to see how it landed with the public, or a leak from the budget. And this is absolutely unprecedented. In the old days, Chancellors entered what was called purdah, where they made no public pronouncements on the budget whatsoever. The Sunday newspapers would get a photo call the previous weekend of the Chancellor walking their dog or whatever. This has been completely the opposite. We had Rachel Reeves giving a speech the week before last where she basically warned everyone that she was going to breach the manifesto commitment and put up income taxes. So really, that OBR leak was just a sort of cherry on the icing for me of what's been an absolutely shambolic 12 weeks. Never seen anything like it.
Zoe, just to you on the whole issue of journalists being briefed about policy weeks in advance, it's almost as if they're flying kites to see which the public like and which they don't like, and then they're shaping policy off the back of it. I mean, it's not good governance.
No, it's not. I mean, there's definitely an element of that where chancellors, or potentially not the chancellor themselves, but Treasury officials might brief out a particular policy, see how it lands with the public. You know, if they get a huge backlash, they'll withdraw it, or they might be ceding their ground. So actually what they put out is not nearly as bad as what they actually do. So people's expectations are managed a little bit. I do think there is a kind of weird doom loop. We use that phrase a lot, but this kind of relationship between the media and the government, where the media are baying for information all the time. When we have this fiscal event looming, remember this one was pushed back. It was later in the year than usual as well. Journalists are obsessed with finding out the details. and the Westminster gossip mill churns and churns and churns. People want to get the scoop, and then officials feed into that, and then you have Rachel Reeves making this unprecedented speech, basically telling us all but saying the words that there are going to be income tax rises, only for there not to be income tax rises. I mean, how destructive is that for people trying to go about their daily lives, try to plan for the markets? You know, we're constantly talking about being enthralled to the markets. It's incredibly unhelpful governance. And I think it actually makes a fairly compelling case to think about whether we should be doing these big fiscal events once a year, or should we be thinking about another more responsible way to do big monetary policy?
Charlotte, give us your impression of how she handled it then, Rachel Reeves, overall.
Well, I have to say, at the dispatch box, she looked crestfallen. I did even think she might cry again, which she did at the last one. And Kemi Badenoch did a brilliant job. She's really on form. She really took Rachel down a peg or two or 10. But I felt the whole thing, a bit like you were saying, the whole build-up, the long kind of build-up, the fact that it got pushed back, the kite flying, just created a feeling of chaos. So it got to the point of the dispatch box and people just felt, at least people I knew, just felt deflated, confused, and they just felt like giving up before she even spoke. And then when she spoke, they really did give up because there was just no hope in there.
Can I come back on that?
Yeah, of course, yeah.
I actually think Reeves was fairly, I think she was fine in the dispatch box. I think she was all right. I actually found Kemi Badenoch, I thought she was appalling. I thought she was really personal. I thought she undermined herself so much. She talks about the Conservative Party wanting to be the party of fiscal responsibility, wanting to bring back their economic credibility. And she launched personal attack after personal attack on the Chancellor. That is not a way of doing governance.
I have to say,
it
Charlotte,
comes across badly.
There was one line that Reeves did come out with, and she said, "This is not about 14 months of us, it's about 14 years of you."
Yeah,
Conservatives. I thought that was quite punchy.
I thought it was quite punchy as well when Badenoch said, "Oh, is that Keir Starmer mansplaining to you?" And I thought that was a bit patronising and possibly, to your point, a bit close to the bone. But I think what Badenoch was doing was expressing the anger that a lot of us are all feeling, especially those who work hard and feel that they're being punished. There was a lot of visceral anger to how she spoke, and I think that actually reflected the mood of great swathes of the nation.
Sorry, really briefly, I get that, but I think Kemi Badenoch should have a bit more contrition because, after all, her government did do a lot of damage to this country. They didn't invest in the country when the sun was shining, when interest rates and borrowing rates were low. I think they have a lot of responsibility to bear for the state of the economy at the minute, and I find her tone really off-putting, actually. I think you can make valid economic points without being so personal.
Ian, I want to touch upon one group of people who are not doing very much in the UK, and there's 9 million of them not in work. Adults, working age people, 18 to 65-year-olds doing nothing. How does Rachel Reeves get these people contributing to British life?
Well, the one area of the benefits bill that's really mushroomed over recent years is people on sickness and disability benefits. And that really dates back to the pandemic, where the government stopped doing face-to-face assessments of people's illness. And you now have online influencers telling people how they can
cheat the system.
Effectively. And that explains the real mushrooming of benefits. And that's going to continue at the moment, according to the OBR. The sickness benefit bill alone, they actually upgraded it from their March forecast to £103.6 billion by the end of this Parliament. That's how much sickness benefit alone is going to be costing us. A lot of it is down to these sort of sick fluences egging people on. They're going to bring back face-to-face assessments. So that's one thing that they have to do. But I think there is something to this narrative that, there is a bit of a sort of benefit street culture in the UK. This sort of something for nothing culture. And that's really what they've got to get to grips with.
Zoe, let's look at the future of Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves. They're inextricably linked, I guess. This either flies or it sinks.
Yes, I think so. I mean, as I said, I think they have bought themselves more time with this budget. I don't think we're going to see any suggestion of Keir Starmer or Rachel Reeves leaving in the next few weeks. Having said that, it certainly hasn't put to bed whispers amongst Labour MPs of the need for a new leader. The problem is they don't have a natural successor. There was a lot of conversations about Andy Burnham, who's the Mayor of Greater Manchester. He slightly fumbled it with the way he sort of potentially went about trying to launch a leadership coup over Labour Party conference. There were suggestions about Wes Streeting, who, of course, is the Health Secretary not that long ago. Again, kites flying and put to bed. So a lot of this is an issue of the Labour government and the Labour Party not having a clear idea of what the Labour Party should be at the minute. Who should lead it? What should it be campaigning for? What does it look like? And I think until they have that sorted, they might be dissatisfied with their leader. They might want a change of approach, but they're not going to band together and successfully oust him. I think the next pinch point will be May, when we have local elections. If Labour do very badly then, you're definitely going to get some very irritated Labour MPs. Remember, a lot of these Labour MPs have small majorities. They are worried about their seats. They're worried about the next election. They are going to be thinking, if we oust him now and get a new change of course, could that turn around our fortunes? But I think the problem is finding somebody who's willing to take on that mantle and fight Reform UK, because they do seem to be the biggest challenger.
Charlotte, just on that point, I've heard it said in the last 24 hours that this is a very good budget for Wes Streeting, who wants to be Prime Minister and wants Starmer out.
Yeah,
if we believe the briefings.
Yes, I mean, certainly he does. I think he's in for a chance in May, to be honest. One thing I do believe, slightly contrary to what you said, is that I think Rachel gave an inauthentic budget, in that I don't think she would have made some of those changes if it wasn't for the fact she was under pressure from Keir Starmer. And so I think the two of them together are in a bit of a toxic mess at the moment. I'm starting to not believe in them as a team, really. I think actually she would have done the welfare cuts if she could have done. And I think actually she may even have raised income tax. But I just feel like she's enthralled to Keir Starmer. I get the impression she's sort of afraid of him, or it just doesn't seem to match for me. So I would like to see Wes Streeting come in as a breath of fresh air, possibly with a new Chancellor.
Ian, just one final point. I want to talk about other countries in Europe who are struggling as well. The UK is not alone in looking for growth. I mean, the French have huge debt problems. The German economy is flatlining along. They will be looking at this budget and just thinking what they can cherry pick out of it, or how they can kind of turn it to maybe help their fortunes next year.
Well, funnily enough, I think the UK is becoming more European-like. The Conservative commentator Danny Finkelstein did an excellent column in The Times earlier this week where he said what Starmer lacks is a narrative, which is to your point, Charlotte. We don't know what Starmer stands for. And one thing that I do think is becoming a narrative for this government, either by accident or by design, is that we are becoming more like Europe. We now have the highest tax to GDP ratio, we will do by the end of this Parliament, 38.3%. That is the highest since 1947. Tax is now at historically very, very high levels here in the UK.
So that was the tax level paying off World War II.
Post the Second World War, yeah.
That's where we're at.
Yeah. It's incredible. And there comes a point where, and it's the way that taxes are paid. I mean, we're not like the Scandinavians, for example. We have possibly the most progressive tax system now in Europe. The highest 1% of earners pay 29% of all income taxes. Middle and average earners, people on average earnings, are paying less tax as a proportion of their salary than they have been since the war. So the tax increases, and again, we saw this yesterday, it's high earners who are going to be bearing the brunt of this by and large. And so we're unlike the Europeans in that sense, but we are becoming a higher tax economy. And at some point, as I say, that feels like it's a narrative. That is something potentially that Starmer and Reeves could go out and sell to their supporters, except that you have to have European-style public service quality to go with it. And we don't. I mean, no one would really rationally argue that the NHS is as good as healthcare provision in France or Germany or the Netherlands, for example. Germany, but I just pick you up on that, Enda, though. I mean, Germany's economy is being boosted by the fact that they're having to spend more on defence. Germany will spend more on defence as a share of GDP this year than the UK will. And that's something, again, we haven't seen since the 1940s.
So just a point to pick up on from what Ian said. What does Keir Starmer stand for? If you stop someone in the street in England, Wales, Scotland and ask that question, what would the public say?
I don't know. It's very, very difficult to pin down. He's technocratic. He's managerial. I think when he was coming into government, I thought Keir Starmer would sell himself as a rules man. He's a former human rights lawyer. They made a big deal about how the UK would follow its international obligations. It would stay in the ECHR. It would move closer to its European neighbours. It would do things by the book. It would be a law-abiding country. And I thought, actually, Brits love law and order. That could be quite a successful message if you know how to sell it. That didn't happen. I think that's the way they should have gone. I think you can make progressive arguments on that side for judicial reform and the reform of the criminal justice system, and you can also make arguments that would appeal to people on the right of the political spectrum as well. But actually, they've lost any sense of what this country could be. And I think that is the thing. If you're going to band voters together, you need to tell them that after 5 years, 10 years in government, this is what the country's going to look like. Are we going to be more tolerant, wealthier, more prosperous, more productive? All of that has been missing. At the minute, everything feels like managerial tweaks to get something back on track. And we know that Rachel Reeves keeps finding headroom and it's knocked out by international shocks. I think there is a really compelling case for the government to put up taxation and talk about how that can improve the lot of this country, whether through productivity, security, etc. But they don't seem willing to make that pitch to the public. And I think that is going to be their undoing.
Charlotte, let's end with a prediction. How long do you give Starmer and Reeves? Till May?
Till May.
Till May.
When Wes
Ian?
comes in.
Let's see how the local elections go. It was interesting, by the way, how much more money they've given to Wales and Scotland, who got big increases last year. They've got another big dollop this year, and that's all about the local elections.
All about the elections. We'll keep across it. Ian, thank you. Charlotte and Zoe as well. Remember, you can see more discussion and debate on our YouTube channel. Search for Roundtable TRT World. But for now, from me, Enda Brady, and all the team here, goodbye, and thank you for watching.